The early light of dawn crept softly through the shoji screens of Hinata's room, casting long, wavering shadows across the tatami mat. Even as the village stirred with the promise of a new day, Hinata sat in quiet contemplation at her low wooden desk, her eyes fixed on a delicate porcelain cup of tea. The ritual of morning had become a silent meditation, a moment of pause before the relentless tide of obligations and expectations surged forth. Today, more than any other day, carried the weight of impending destiny, a destiny that, despite the joyous anticipation of celebration, was marred by a gnawing disquiet. For weeks now, the whispers of an approaching nuptial ceremony had filled the air. Friends and family bustled about, preparing for what was meant to be a joyful union, a union blessed by tradition and love. Yet, as the long-anticipated celebration neared, Hinata found herself besieged by an inner turbulence that defied the outward calm she endeavored to project. Every delicate smile and carefully measured gesture concealed a storm of emotion swirling within her. There was a persistent echo of regret and longing, a tremor of uncertainty that reverberated through every thought. As she sipped her tea, memories, both cherished and painful, began to unfurl in her mind. The soft cadence of laughter, the fleeting moments of quiet intimacy with those who had touched her life, and the unspoken desires that she had long since buried beneath layers of duty, all coalesced into a mosaic of bittersweet recollections. Among these memories, one presence stood out starkly: Sasuke. His image surfaced unbidden, his cool gaze and inscrutable demeanor interlaced with fragments of a past that refused to be entirely forgotten. In the solitude of her private haven, Hinata's thoughts drifted to moments when Sasuke's presence had been a silent counterpoint to her own. She recalled the way his eyes would catch the light, a spark of intensity that spoke of hidden depths and unresolved histories. There was a time when their paths had crossed in a manner that belied the simplicity of their roles, when subtle glances and unspoken words hinted at something more profound than the mere passage of acquaintanceship. Those fleeting encounters had planted a seed of uncertainty in her heart, one that now germinated into an undercurrent of internal conflict. The wedding preparations, with their bright fabrics and cheerful melodies, had gradually transformed her home into a space of celebration. Yet even as the cheerful chatter of her loved ones filled the corridors, Hinata felt isolated by an intangible barrier, a barrier woven from threads of secrecy and inner anguish. Her heart, so accustomed to kindness and compassion, now beat with a hesitant rhythm, as though questioning the sincerity of every promise and every tender vow. The traditional beauty of the ceremony was marred in her mind by visions of that unresolved past, an echo of a night that had never truly found closure. On the cusp of this momentous event, each quiet second was punctuated by the ghost of choices made and roads not taken. The prospect of stepping into a new life with Naruto, a life built on mutual trust and shared dreams, brought with it an undeniable warmth, yet it also illuminated the shadows of what had come before. The celebration was not merely a union of hearts, but a delicate balancing act between the known and the mysterious. In the depths of her being, Hinata grappled with a disquieting realization that the very essence of who she was had been shaped, in part, by the enigmatic presence of Sasuke, a figure whose own internal battles had once intertwined with hers in ways she had never fully understood. As the morning advanced, the golden hues of sunrise gradually gave way to the vibrant energy of a new day. Outside, the gentle hum of daily life resonated through the village, yet within Hinata's heart, an internal dialogue raged. The memory of Sasuke was like a soft murmur, a whisper that both soothed and unsettled her. His presence in her past was not marked by overt declarations or dramatic confrontations. Rather, it was subtle, like a lingering note in a long-forgotten melody. Each recollection of his distant yet piercing eyes, each recollection of his cool, measured voice, served as a reminder of the roads diverged, roads that hinted at uncharted territories of the heart. In the quiet moments before the day's preparations claimed her attention entirely, Hinata allowed herself to dwell on these conflicting emotions. There was solace in acknowledging the complexity of her feelings, in understanding that love was not always a straightforward narrative of right and wrong. Instead, it was a tapestry of interwoven threads, each strand carrying a story of its own. In this tapestry, the memory of Sasuke, his enigmatic allure and the unspoken promises that had once flickered in the darkness, remained an indelible mark. It was a mark that she could neither fully embrace nor entirely banish, a mark that lent an unexpected poignancy to the cusp of her new beginning. The soft rustling of fabric and the distant murmur of voices signaled that others were beginning to stir, that the time for introspection was drawing to a close. Yet Hinata lingered a moment longer, her thoughts circling like autumn leaves caught in a gentle breeze. She wondered if the unresolved threads of the past would ever truly be mended, or if they would continue to weave themselves into the fabric of her future, subtly altering the course of her happiness. The uncertainty was both a curse and a comfort, a reminder that even in moments of anticipated joy, the heart might harbor secrets too delicate to share. Somewhere beyond the threshold of her window, the path that Sasuke had once walked seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Though physically distant, his presence was felt, a spectral reminder of the past that lingered in every quiet corner of her mind. In the interplay of light and shadow, Hinata recognized that every moment, every heartbeat, was an invitation to confront the complexity of her own desires and doubts. The celebration that loomed large on the horizon was not just a marker of an impending union but a crossroads where the old and the new converged. As she rose from her seat, the resolve to face the day with grace mingled with an unspoken acknowledgement of her internal strife. With measured steps, she moved toward the door, leaving behind the sanctity of her private refuge to join the world outside. A world where every smile masked a story and every gesture carried the weight of unspoken truths. In the gentle hum of the waking village, Hinata's soul danced between the promise of tomorrow and the lingering shadows of yesterday. In that silent transition, as the day unfolded with a mixture of anticipation and melancholy, Hinata felt the pull of destiny. The celebration ahead was as much a farewell to the past as it was an embrace of the future. And even as the joyous rituals of preparation began to encircle her, the presence of Sasuke remained like a distant echo, a reminder that every beginning is intertwined with echoes of what once was, and that some thresholds, once crossed, may forever alter the landscape of the heart. Thus, with the first tentative steps into the day, Hinata carried with her a secret refrain of uncertainty. It was a melody composed of hopes and regrets, of the beauty of a new promise, and the lingering traces of an old enigma. And in that intricate interplay of light and shadow, the stage was quietly set for a journey that would challenge the boundaries of love, loyalty, and the very nature of destiny itself. The day had slipped quietly into dusk, and as twilight draped the world in muted indigo hues, Hinata found herself drawn away from the bustling heart of the festivities. The lingering laughter and cheerful chatter of the celebration faded behind her like a distant echo, replaced by the whisper of the wind through ancient trees. In that secretive hour, when shadows stretched long and the boundaries of certainty blurred, an inner yearning nudged her along a hidden path, a call both mysterious and magnetic. She moved almost as if guided by fate, her heart thrumming with trepidation and anticipation in equal measure. The narrow trail wound its way through a dense copse of cedar and pine, their lofty branches interlocking overhead to form a natural vault against the night sky. In this secluded corridor of nature, the world seemed to pause, leaving Hinata suspended in a liminal space between duty and desire. Every soft crunch of gravel beneath her feet and every whisper of a leaf carried a weight of meaning, each sound resonating like a secret note in an unspoken symphony. Unbeknownst to her, this isolated avenue would soon become the stage for an encounter that defied expectations and challenged the carefully constructed order of her life. A subtle, almost imperceptible glow emanated from a clearing ahead, where moonlight broke through the canopy to bathe a small, secluded clearing in silver radiance. It was here, far removed from the watchful eyes of friends and family, that fate conspired to bring together two souls long separated by circumstance and silence. As Hinata neared the clearing, a quiet pause fell upon the night, a pregnant silence that spoke of both promise and forewarning. Standing alone in the half-light was a solitary figure, his presence as unexpected as it was magnetic. Sasuke's silhouette cut a stark figure against the soft glow of moonlight. Clad in dark garments that seemed to absorb the surrounding light, he exuded an aura of quiet intensity. His posture was relaxed, yet every line of his being betrayed the tension of unspoken thoughts. In that moment, time seemed to slow, and the charged atmosphere between them crystallized into something palpable, a mixture of anticipation, regret, and an inexplicable pull that defied the boundaries of their known worlds. For a heartbeat neither spoke. Hinata's heart pounded in her ears as she approached cautiously, each step deliberate and laced with uncertainty. The very air between them vibrated with an energy that was both dangerous and electrifying. In Sasuke's eyes, cool and enigmatic as ever, Hinata glimpsed reflections of past shadows and hidden truths, a silent acknowledgement of a shared history that neither had ever fully addressed. Though his gaze was guarded, it held a flicker of something more tender, a vulnerability that he would rarely allow to surface. As she drew nearer, the forest seemed to exhale a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, as if aware of the unfolding intimacy. The distance between them closed, and the charged space that separated friend from confidant dissolved into an unspoken promise of understanding. It was in this hushed interlude that Hinata's guarded composure began to fray, revealing the raw edges of her inner world. The careful mask she had worn all her life, of gentleness, compliance, and quiet strength, wavered in the presence of Sasuke's inscrutable aura. In a low, measured tone that belied his usual reticence, Sasuke finally broke the silence. "I did not expect to find you here," he murmured, his voice carrying both curiosity and a hint of regret. The words hung in the cool night air, delicate and fraught with implications. Hinata's response was a whisper of acknowledgement, a fragile admission that her path had indeed led her to this moment. There was no pretense in her eyes now, only a cautious openness and an unspoken question of whether fate had brought them together for reasons beyond their control. Under the shelter of ancient trees, amidst the interplay of moonlight and shadow, their conversation unfolded in muted tones. They spoke little of the world beyond the clearing, for each word exchanged resonated with the weight of memories, of paths once diverged, and of a destiny that seemed to defy the simple confines of loyalty and duty. The exchange was not a confession but rather a recognition, a quiet, intimate acknowledgement of the fissures that had long marred their respective hearts. In Sasuke's measured cadence, Hinata discerned a wistfulness that hinted at battles fought in silence, of moments when the harsh realities of life had forced him to bury emotions that now stirred, however faintly, beneath his cool veneer. Every gesture was loaded with unspoken meaning. When Sasuke shifted his stance, his eyes briefly met Hinata's with an intensity that belied his calm exterior. It was as if the cosmos had conspired in that fleeting glance to condense all the unsaid words into a single, charged moment. Hinata felt the pull of an irresistible gravity, a force that challenged her long-held convictions and beckoned her toward a precipice from which there might be no return. The shadows around them deepened, and for one suspended moment, vulnerability and desire intertwined in a dance as ancient as time. In the hush of that enchanted night, the air itself seemed to tremble with possibility. Hinata's defenses, always so carefully maintained, began to crumble beneath the weight of unrelenting yearning. The quiet power of the encounter stirred memories of forgotten hopes and unfulfilled dreams, a litany of desires that had long been confined to the silent recesses of her soul. In Sasuke's presence, she felt both the sting of past disappointments and the tantalizing promise of something entirely new. There, in that secluded haven away from the world's gaze, the boundaries of propriety and destiny blurred. It was in this charged atmosphere that an irreversible decision began to take shape, a subtle yet profound shift in the balance of her heart. With every shared glance and every pause pregnant with meaning, Hinata sensed that the course of her life was being irrevocably altered. In that moment of unscripted vulnerability, the weight of her future, bound by obligations, promises, and the anticipated union with another, warred with the silent allure of an uncertain possibility. The tension between duty and desire was palpable, an invisible thread drawing her toward a crossroad from which there might be no retreat. For a few long, breathless minutes, the world narrowed to the quiet clearing and the two souls standing within it. There was a fragile beauty in the collision of their inner worlds, a collision that promised both liberation and the potential for lasting turmoil. The night deepened around them, and with it, the gravity of their shared moment grew ever more profound. In the tender vulnerability of their mutual silence, a seed was planted, one that would ultimately sprout into choices too significant to be undone. As the gentle caress of night gave way to the silent pulse of destiny, Hinata and Sasuke remained suspended in that transformative embrace of uncertainty. In the interplay of light and dark, past regrets and future hopes, their encounter became a pivotal juncture, a convergence in the shadows where the fragility of the human heart met the inexorable pull of fate. And though no explicit promise was made, the weight of their shared vulnerability spoke volumes. Some encounters are destined to reshape the contours of our lives, leaving an indelible mark that time itself cannot erase. In that hidden clearing, Away from the vigilant eyes of a world bound by convention, the seeds of irreversible decisions were sown. Each heartbeat, each tremulous pause set the stage for a journey that would carry both Hinata and Sasuke far beyond the quiet sanctuary of the night. A journey into a realm where the certainty of the known yielded to the wild, uncharted territories of the heart. Beneath a velvet sky inked with scattered stars, the night held its breath. In a secluded chamber far removed from prying eyes, a hidden alcove behind an ancient tea-house lit only by the gentle, wavering glow of paper lanterns, Hinata and Sasuke found themselves drawn together by forces too powerful to resist. The room, modest and cloistered, seemed to exist in its own quiet universe, where every sound was magnified, the soft rustle of silk against wood, the measured tick of an unseen clock, and the whisper of the night wind slipping through narrow cracks in the walls. Hinata entered slowly, as if each step carried the weight of a lifetime of unspoken yearning. Her kimono, a cascade of muted hues, shimmered softly in the lantern light, echoing the trembling emotions that churned within her. The fabric, cool against her skin, betrayed her inner turmoil, a turbulence born from the clash of duty and desire. She paused near a low wooden table, the air thick with anticipation, her gaze instinctively seeking the dark silhouette of Sasuke who stood a few paces away. Sasuke's presence was magnetic, a stark counterpoint to the delicate vulnerability that radiated from Hinata. His eyes, dark and fathomless, held not only the inscrutable calm he was known for but also a rare, flickering warmth that hinted at hidden scars and unspoken confessions. In that moment, the barrier of years and carefully constructed personas began to crack. The distance between them, measured in silent glances and tentative steps, evaporated into the charged space of the night. A silence, heavy with expectation, enveloped them. It was as though the room itself had become a sacred vessel for secrets too potent to be spoken aloud. The steady cadence of their heartbeats punctuated the quiet, a shared rhythm that merged their disparate souls. In the soft illumination, Hinata's eyes shimmered with a mixture of apprehension and longing. The emotional ramparts she had so diligently maintained in her daily life, fashioned from duty and gentle obedience, started to crumble beneath the unyielding force of this forbidden allure. "Tonight," Sasuke began, his voice low and measured, each syllable weighted with both resolve and regret. His tone carried a rare vulnerability, a confession of sorts, mirroring the tumult of his inner world. Hinata, her breath catching, stepped closer. The air between them was charged, electrified by a promise of both passion and peril. It was as if the very fabric of the night had woven them together in a tapestry of shared fate, where each thread was spun from memories of lost chances and dreams deferred. The world outside was forgotten as they moved toward one another. Time, often so relentless and unforgiving, seemed to yield here, elongating into an eternity where only this moment mattered. As their hands tentatively brushed, a silent understanding passed between them, a recognition of the fragile beauty inherent in this stolen interlude. Their touch was a language unto itself, speaking of longing, despair, and the fierce, burning need to reclaim a piece of what had long been hidden beneath the surface. The intimacy of the encounter was both tender and tumultuous. Hinata's delicate fingers, trembling with a mixture of desire and trepidation, traced the contours of Sasuke's hand. His skin, cool and steady, responded with an uncharacteristic gentleness that belied his rugged exterior. In that small, dimly lit room, emotional barriers dissolved as naturally as dew evaporates in the morning sun. Each fleeting caress and every softly exchanged look spoke volumes. A silent litany of confessions, of regrets and hopes intermingled like the soft strains of a forgotten melody. As the minutes melted away, the passage of time took on a dreamlike quality. The gentle flicker of the lantern's flame became a metronome to their unfolding intimacy, its delicate dance casting shifting shadows upon their entwined forms. The subtle interplay of light and darkness mirrored the internal struggle between what was forbidden and what was desperately sought. Every second stretched into an eternity, a continuum where the past and the future blurred into insignificance, leaving only the intensity of the now. In this hallowed space, desire and consequence entwined. There was an undeniable magnetism in the way their souls converged, an unspoken pact that defied the rigid confines of tradition and expectation. With each tender embrace, Hinata felt the shackles of duty loosen, replaced by the raw, pulsating energy of unbridled passion. And yet, in the same breath, a quiet dread whispered of the irrevocable costs that would follow. The intensity of their union was tempered by the acute awareness that, beyond these walls, the world would judge and the consequences would be as enduring as they were inevitable. The room itself seemed to breathe with them. Every shadow cast on the walls carried the echoes of their shared vulnerability, every shifting beam of light a silent witness to the collision of their hidden desires. The interplay of sound and silence, of passion and restraint, was so complete that even the mundane, like the creak of the wooden floor or the soft hum of the distant night, became part of their clandestine symphony. This was not merely a meeting of bodies, but of hearts, minds, and the deepest, most secret parts of their souls. As their closeness deepened, time took on an almost tangible quality. It seemed to flow like a gentle stream around them, indifferent to the tumult of human emotion. In this private sanctuary, the past with all its bittersweet memories and the uncertain future laden with consequence merged into one fleeting, incandescent moment. Their eyes locked in a silent exchange that conveyed everything words could not capture, a narrative of regret for what was lost, and an acceptance of the irreversible nature of the present. Every gentle sigh, every whispered name was imbued with the weight of a decision that could not be unmade. With the steady advance of time marked only by the slow progression of night into the uncertain promise of dawn, Hinata and Sasuke surrendered to the gravity of their emotions. The sensual brush of fingertips, the mingling of warm breath and cool night air, and the steady rhythm of two hearts beating in unison formed a sacred rite of passage, a forbidden interlude where the rigid structures of their former selves were left far behind. In the delicate interplay of shadows and light, their passion unfolded like a fragile blossom in the darkness. It was as if the universe had orchestrated this moment to be both ephemeral and eternal, a stolen fragment of time where the usual confines of honor, duty, and expectation were momentarily suspended. Their union was not marked by grand declarations or dramatic flares of emotion but by a quiet intensity, a series of small, irrevocable choices that, together, would alter the course of their lives. At length, as the lantern's light waned and the inexorable march of time pressed in upon them, a tender finality settled over the room. The interlude, though brief, felt both infinite and fleeting, a bittersweet prelude to the consequences that would soon shatter the fragile peace of their separate worlds. In that dim, sacred space, as the last vestiges of the night yielded to the soft promise of approaching dawn, Hinata and Sasuke lingered in the afterglow of a connection that defied logic and fate alike. Their eyes met one final time, heavy with the understanding that what had transpired could never be undone, yet would forever remain etched in the quiet chambers of their hearts. The forbidden interlude had shattered old barriers and laid bare truths long concealed. And as the first light of morning threatened the sanctity of the night, each knew that the consequences of this intimate rebellion would ripple outward, altering destinies and forever transforming the landscapes of love, honor, and self. Thus, in the tender aftermath, as silence reclaimed the room and the world beyond began to stir with the promise of a new day, the memory of that night, of the slow, inexorable passage of time and the mingling of desire with irrevocable consequence, would linger as a secret echo, a soft, haunting refrain that whispered of what once was and what could never be forgotten. The first pale rays of dawn spilled gently into the small, unadorned room, suffusing it with a soft, uncertain glow. In the wake of the clandestine hours that had blurred the boundaries of honor and desire, the morning brought with it an unyielding clarity, a reckoning that was as inevitable as the rising sun. The silken curtains fluttered in the cool breeze, their delicate movements echoing the tremulous stirrings of a heart caught between passion and despair. Every mote of dust dancing in the slanting light bore witness to secrets that had been shared under the guise of darkness, now reluctantly revealed by the relentless truth of daybreak. Hinata awoke to this spectral illumination with a sense of disorientation. Her eyes, still heavy with the vestiges of sleep, slowly adjusted to the emerging day. Yet as consciousness returned, so too did the haunting recollections of the previous night, each memory a shard of emotion, glinting with both tenderness and sorrow. She lay motionless for a long, silent moment, the cool, unyielding reality of morning contrasting sharply with the fevered intensity of hours past. Within her, a storm of regret and confusion swirled, as if the delicate barriers she had so carefully maintained were now irrevocably shattered. The tender intimacy, the shared whispers, and the fleeting surrender of her guarded nature had all left indelible marks on her soul, marks that now throbbed with both longing and the bitter taste of remorse. Across the modest chamber, Sasuke stirred with the effortless detachment that had come to define him. Where Hinata's inner world was a maelstrom of conflicting sentiments, his demeanor remained cool, his expression as inscrutable as the still, dark surface of a tranquil lake. As he sat at a low wooden table, his eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the paper windows, there was an almost imperceptible detachment in his gaze, a hint of indifference that belied the tumult of the night before. The cool detachment in his features, the steady rhythm of his measured breathing, and the calm posture he maintained were all part of a practiced facade. For Sasuke, the passage of the nocturnal hours seemed to have left him with little more than a fleeting memory, a momentary divergence in his carefully charted path, quickly absorbed back into the continuum of duty and survival. The contrast between them was stark. Hinata's inner world, once a reservoir of quiet resilience, now overflowed with emotion that threatened to unmoor her. The soft warmth of dawn, rather than offering solace, accentuated the chill of her guilt and the disarray of her thoughts. Her mind raced with images, each one a fragment of a past that she wished to forget, yet which now demanded to be acknowledged. Every soft murmur of the waking world, every subtle shift in the light, served as a reminder of the delicate boundaries she had transgressed. There was a palpable ache in the space between desire and duty, a discordant refrain that echoed in every beat of her heart. As the blush of sunrise painted the room in tentative hues, Hinata found herself adrift in a sea of inner conflict, where the sweet memory of stolen intimacy clashed violently with the heavy mantle of regret. Meanwhile, Sasuke's impassive exterior lent him an almost ghostly presence in the nascent light. His thoughts, locked away behind eyes that rarely betrayed emotion, seemed to be enshrouded in a quiet acceptance, a stoic resignation that the night's events were simply another twist in an unpredictable life. Yet beneath that veneer, there was a subtle acknowledgement of what had transpired, a recognition, perhaps, that even the most disciplined hearts are not immune to the call of forbidden sentiments. His silence was not born of indifference, but rather of a determination to compartmentalize the past from the present, to allow the pragmatic cadence of duty to override the soft murmur of lingering feelings. In his measured calm, Sasuke appeared to be preparing for the day ahead with a calculated resolve, his focus on the tasks that lay in wait outside the intimate confines of this chamber. The room itself seemed to mirror the tumult within. Where shadows had danced on the walls in the cool embrace of night, now only the sober truth of morning remained. The once secret alcove, hidden from the gaze of the world, was now bathed in the unyielding light of day, a light that made it impossible to hide the scars of transgression. Faded traces of the night's passion lingered in the air, the soft, mingled fragrance of Hinata's subtle perfume, and the faint echo of whispered names, now dissipating into the silence of dawn. Every corner of the space bore a quiet testament to the fragile, irreversible nature of the choices made after dark, and the room seemed poised to divulge its secrets to the unrelenting scrutiny of the new day. In this fragile hour of reckoning, Hinata's thoughts wandered through a labyrinth of introspection. Every beat of her heart resounded with the weight of consequences yet to unfold. She felt the pangs of remorse tighten around her, as memories of the intimacy and vulnerability shared with Sasuke mingled with the certainty of an impending rupture in her carefully curated life. The delicate balance between longing and regret was now disturbed, leaving her to grapple with the painful realization that some lines, once crossed, could never be redrawn. Her mind was beset by questions that would likely haunt her throughout the day, questions about identity, about loyalty, and about the irrevocable cost of a moment's passion. As the morning deepened, a subtle tension began to weave itself into the fabric of the day. Outside, the village stirred from its slumber, the sounds of daily life, distant chatter, the clatter of feet on cobblestones, and the rhythmic murmur of nature, hinting at the inevitable return to routine. Yet within the walls of this hidden sanctuary, the aftermath of a night of forbidden closeness promised to cast a long shadow over the hours to come. The cool detachment of Sasuke, the fervent regret of Hinata, and the quiet, unspoken acknowledgement of consequences combined to create an atmosphere heavy with unspoken threats and fragile hope. It was as if the dawn itself had become a herald of buried secrets, ready to unearth hidden truths that had long been masked by the comforting veil of oblivion. There was an almost preternatural stillness that accompanied this early hour, a stillness that was not merely the absence of sound, but a palpable pause, a breath held in anticipation of the inevitable revelations. The light of morning, though gentle, cast long, revealing shadows across the floor, each one a silent reminder of the night's indiscretions. The lingering tension seemed to seep into every fiber of the room, setting the stage for a day that would not only test the bonds of duty and honor but would also force the heart to confront its most deeply hidden scars. Every ray of light, every soft whisper of the wind, promised that the secrets of the night were not confined to memory but would soon surface in the harsh light of reality. As Hinata rose to face the day, the internal dissonance that churned within her was palpable. She moved with a measured grace, each step a quiet acknowledgement of the delicate line she now trod between past transgressions and future obligations. The weight of what had transpired pressed upon her like a shroud, both an unbearable burden and a stark reminder of the complexity of the human heart. Her eyes, once filled with quiet determination, now shone with the unmistakable glimmer of remorse and uncertainty. There was a raw, unfiltered honesty in her gaze, a silent plea for absolution, even as she braced herself for the inevitable scrutiny that awaited her beyond these private walls. Sasuke, too, prepared for the day in his own way. Without a word or a glance to betray his inner workings, he rose and donned the vestments of his customary detachment. There was an elegance in his restraint, a measured cadence to his movements that spoke of a man accustomed to weathering the storms of emotion in silence. Yet, beneath that disciplined exterior, one could sense an undercurrent of complexity, a recognition that even the most steadfast resolve could be challenged by the unpredictable tides of desire. His quiet departure from the room was not marked by any overt display of regret, but rather by a subdued awareness that the events of the night had irrevocably altered the contours of their shared existence. In the lingering hush of the early morning, as the world beyond the chamber began to stir with renewed purpose, the stage was set for the unearthing of buried secrets. The duality of the human heart, its capacity for both tender love and searing remorse, was laid bare in the fragile interplay of light and shadow, of memory and hope. Hinata's inner conflict, raw and unyielding, promised to become the crucible in which the truth of her desires and the weight of her choices would be tested. Meanwhile, Sasuke's cool composure served as a silent counterpoint, a reminder that sometimes, the greatest battles are fought in the quiet recesses of the soul, away from the prying eyes of the world. Thus, as the first full light of day broke over the horizon and the vestiges of night's transgressions began to fade into the realm of memory, the day ahead loomed large with the promise of revelation. The intimate reckoning of the morning was not merely an end, but the prelude to a series of unfolding truths, a day destined to strip away the carefully constructed facades and expose the raw, unvarnished reality of hearts in turmoil. In that moment, every whisper of the wind and every ray of light seemed to speak of the inexorable march toward consequences, of the fragile hope that, in the relentless clarity of day, even the most hidden secrets might finally be brought to light. And so, with heavy hearts and uncertain steps, both Hinata and Sasuke embarked on the new day, each carrying the weight of what had transpired, each poised at the threshold of revelations that would forever alter the tapestry of their lives. The morning's reckoning had begun, its quiet yet insistent pulse a prelude to a future where every secret, every unspoken truth, would demand its due. The early morning air shimmered with a blend of anticipation and orchestrated merriment, as the village prepared for a celebration meant to herald a new chapter of joy and unity. At the heart of this vibrant tableau, Hinata stood poised before a mirror, her reflection framed by soft natural light and the gentle murmur of voices beyond the ornate sliding panels. Adorned in a resplendent bridal kimono, a cascade of pastel silks intricately embroidered with symbols of fortune and hope, she appeared every bit the emblem of traditional grace and beauty. Yet behind those carefully arranged features, a tempest of private sorrow churned in silence. As Hinata meticulously adjusted the delicate fabric around her shoulders, her mind drifted to the events of the previous night, moments of forbidden intimacy that now echoed with the weight of regret. Every whispered promise and every fleeting touch shared in the secrecy of the night had left an indelible mark on her spirit, a secret that she was determined to keep buried beneath the veneer of ritual and gaiety. The soft rustle of her kimono seemed to murmur of lost innocence, and each glance at the ornate mirror reminded her that the woman preparing for this union was also one haunted by unspoken transgressions. Outside, the compound teemed with an orchestrated chaos of joyful preparations. Floral arrangements of cherry blossoms and peonies were being arranged with impeccable precision, their fragrant petals scattered like confetti over polished wooden walkways. The gentle strains of a traditional melody floated through the air, blending with the sounds of laughter and cordial greetings from relatives and neighbors. Every corner of the venue was saturated with the promise of celebration, each detail meticulously designed to evoke an ambience of serene bliss. Yet within this radiant panorama, Hinata's inner world remained cloaked in a disquiet that no amount of festive decor could dispel. As she descended a set of gracefully curved steps, each footfall resonating softly on the stone, Hinata was acutely aware of the public role she was destined to fulfill. The eyes of her kin, friends, and even distant acquaintances shone with pride and expectation, all oblivious to the silent battle raging within her. In every courteous smile and polite nod exchanged with well-wishers, there was an undercurrent of prescribed delight, a facade meticulously maintained to honor the sanctity of the occasion. Her delicate features, illuminated by the morning sun, betrayed nothing of the inner tumult that churned beneath. Instead, they were masked by a serene composure that had long been the hallmark of her gentle spirit. Her thoughts, however, betrayed her even as she moved with the practiced grace of a bride. Beneath the layers of ceremonial fabric and carefully applied makeup, her heart drummed in irregular rhythm, a quiet cadence of remorse and uncertainty that pulsed with each measured step. Every time her eyes inadvertently strayed towards the horizon, they seemed to search for the echo of the previous night's forbidden encounter. In those brief, furtive moments, the flicker of a tear threatened to betray her, only to be quickly smothered by the imperatives of the role she was expected to embody. At the entrance to the ceremonial hall, adorned with vibrant banners and the rich scents of incense and fresh blossoms, a hush fell over the gathered crowd. The atmosphere was one of solemn joy, where the rituals of age-old traditions were about to be enacted in their full, resplendent splendor. Hinata's gaze swept over the assembly, noting the carefully orchestrated smiles and the subtle glances of admiration. Yet, amid the collective effervescence, her inner thoughts whispered of discord. There was an undeniable dissonance between the public celebration and the private ache that gnawed at her, a secret fissure in the foundation of her expected happiness. Inside the hall, beneath a grand canopy of woven silks and luminous paper lanterns, the stage was set for the unfolding of vows and the merging of destinies. As she took her place among the procession, each step felt like a careful balancing act, one foot anchored in duty, the other burdened by the guilt of a night spent away from the sanctioned path. Her presence, though immaculate and composed, carried the subtle tremor of concealed sorrow. The warmth of the ceremonial glow did little to ease the chill that clutched at her heart, a reminder that the joys on display were interlaced with threads of unspoken regrets. The groom, Naruto, awaited her with an expression that was at once hopeful and earnest, his eyes alight with the promise of a shared future. His smile, radiant and full of unwavering trust, was a stark contrast to the silent turmoil that coursed through Hinata. In that moment, as their gazes met, a fleeting flash of uncertainty crossed her features, a momentary lapse in the carefully cultivated mask of bridal poise. The crowd, immersed in the sanctity of tradition, remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrents of doubt swirling beneath her composed exterior. As the ritual commenced, every movement and uttered phrase was steeped in symbolic significance. The rhythmic cadence of ceremonial chants and the gentle rustling of silk echoed through the hall, creating a soundscape that was both ancient and timeless. Yet even as the prescribed rites unfolded with flawless precision, there lingered an intangible dissonance in Hinata's heart. The crisp, clear words of the priest, extolling virtues of fidelity, unity, and destiny, resonated in the space around her, each syllable a reminder of the sacred promises she was about to seal, and of the betrayal that lay hidden in the recesses of her memory. Throughout the ceremony, subtle hints of her inner disquiet emerged in the most delicate of gestures. A slight falter in her step as she moved gracefully beside her groom, the barely perceptible twitch of her lip when a memory threatened to surface, or the way her eyes occasionally darted towards a shadowed corner of the hall as if seeking an escape from the inevitable scrutiny. All these nuances whispered of a heart divided. The gentle laughter and shared glances among the assembled guests, so carefully choreographed to evoke a scene of perfect harmony, seemed to mock the silent confession of her soul. Her hands, which had just moments before trembled with the weight of forbidden passion, now rested demurely in the folds of her embroidered sleeves. Yet even as she maintained the outward semblance of composure, the sensations of the previous night persisted, lingering like an unwanted guest in the quiet recesses of her thoughts. The memory of soft, Unguarded moments in a clandestine embrace mingled with the formal cadence of the wedding rites, creating an internal cacophony that belied the outward serenity she projected. Every whispered compliment from a well-meaning relative, every gentle touch of a friend's hand, seemed imbued with a silent plea for solace that she could neither accept nor reciprocate. The very air around her, scented with jasmine and sandalwood, carried the bittersweet fragrance of lost innocence and unfulfilled promises. Amid the orchestrated merriment, there was a palpable sense that the joy was as much a performance as it was a celebration, a carefully constructed facade designed to mask the hidden fissures of a soul in turmoil. As the ceremony progressed, the contrast between public jubilation and private despair became ever more pronounced. The vibrancy of the festivities, with its bursts of color, melodious music, and effusive expressions of communal happiness, served as a stark counterpoint to the silent, solitary battle waged within Hinata's heart. In the luminous glow of the hall, each joyful note, and every exuberant cheer seemed to underscore the paradox of a life that was meant to be shared yet was irrevocably marked by a secret too heavy to confess. The final moments of the ceremony, marked by the exchange of vows and the symbolic joining of hands, were imbued with an almost surreal poignancy. As Hinata spoke the words of commitment, her voice resonated with a tremulous undercurrent, a subtle quaver that betrayed the depth of her internal strife. In that fleeting moment, as the fabric of her bridal kimono swirled softly around her, and her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the full weight of her transgression pressed upon her like an invisible shroud. Yet, even as the public spectacle reached its crescendo, and the assembled guests erupted in applause, Hinata's mind was a maelstrom of conflicted emotions. The gentle smiles that greeted her at every turn were laced with an unspoken expectation of perfection, a perfection she now knew was irrevocably tainted by the shadow of the past. Beneath the elaborate trappings of the celebration, every carefully orchestrated moment seemed to serve as a reminder that the price of maintaining this pristine image was steep, and that the secrets held deep within could one day disrupt the fragile harmony of her life. In the days to follow, as the festivities wound down and the echoes of ceremonial music faded into the background, subtle hints would emerge. Glances exchanged in quiet corridors, a knowing look from a trusted confidant, or the furtive avoidance of her gaze by those who sensed the discord beneath the surface. These small, almost imperceptible signs promised that the carefully constructed facade of public joy was but a temporary reprieve from the inevitable reckoning with buried truths. Thus, as the celebration marched forward with all its pomp and circumstance, Hinata remained a study in contrast, a bride whose outward grace belied a heart besieged by the echoes of an irreversible night. The jubilant chorus of community and tradition, resounding through the corridors of the venue, masked the solitary lament of a soul wrestling with the consequences of a forbidden embrace. And in every step she took towards a future defined by duty and expectation, the silent specter of regret lurked just beneath the surface, threatening to unravel the delicate tapestry of her carefully curated existence. As the celebration continued in full swing, an undercurrent of unspoken guilt began to seep into the festive atmosphere, subtly altering the day's jubilant cadence. The air, once filled with buoyant laughter and the soft strains of traditional music, now carried an almost imperceptible heaviness, a quiet dissonance that resonated with those attuned to the unspoken language of the heart. Hinata moved through the throng of well-wishers with the poise expected of a bride, yet every measured step betrayed a lingering inner unrest. A slight hesitation in her gait, a momentary falter as she offered a smile, hinted at the emotional turbulence simmering beneath her calm exterior. Her eyes, usually soft and serene, darted briefly toward secluded corners and away from the warmth of friendly gazes, as though seeking refuge from memories too potent to ignore. At times, the delicate curve of her smile wavered as a shadow of regret passed over her features, a transient expression that quickly vanished, replaced once again by the mask of gentle composure. Among her closest allies, those who had known her since childhood and shared in her quiet strength, a series of subtle cues began to sow seeds of suspicion. A trusted friend noticed the slight tremor in Hinata's hand when she absent-mindedly brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, and another observed the fleeting look of anguish that crossed her face whenever a joyful toast was raised. In hushed conversations away from the prying eyes of the assembled guests, concerned glances were exchanged. They wondered, in soft, unspoken tones, if the radiant bride's inner light was dimming under the weight of secrets too burdensome to bear. In the midst of the lively celebration, Sasuke lingered at the fringes of the gathering, his dark eyes observing every detail with a quiet intensity. His gaze, cool and penetrating, followed Hinata's every move as if he were parsing a delicate code of hidden emotions. Each subtle shift in her posture, a fleeting slouch of the shoulders, an almost imperceptible falter in her smile, did not escape his notice. The observant nature that had long defined him now took on an unexpected quality. As he wrestled silently with emotions he had carefully kept at bay, there was something new in his eyes tonight, an uncharacteristic vulnerability mixed with a deep-seated empathy that hinted at an internal struggle of his own. While the festivities boomed with the clamor of communal joy, the clinking of glasses, the hearty laughter of elders, and the lilting harmonies of celebratory music, the emotional equilibrium of the day began to fracture. The exquisite decor, the carefully arranged floral displays, and the vibrant banners that proclaimed hope and unity now seemed to serve as a fragile facade against the encroaching tide of remorse. Within the intricate tapestry of tradition, every whispered compliment and every exuberant congratulation carried with it an underlying tension, a subtle acknowledgement that not all was as harmonious as it appeared on the surface. Hinata's internal conflict, born from the clandestine events of the previous night, wove its way into her public demeanor like ripples across a once calm pond. Her once sure smile now appeared forced at moments, as if every expression of joy was tainted by the echo of a memory she wished to forget. At times, when engaged in conversation, her eyes would momentarily glaze over, lost in a reverie that belied the present moment. In these brief lapses, her closest confidants caught fleeting glimpses of the sorrow and confusion that lay hidden beneath her carefully cultivated exterior, a secret world of regret that threatened to disrupt the delicate balance of the day. Sasuke's silent vigil was both detached and deeply personal. He observed Hinata not merely as an outsider, but as someone whose turmoil stirred long-dormant feelings within him. Each subtle indication of her distress, the pause before she laughed too loudly, the slight quiver in her voice when she was addressed by name, or the way she instinctively sought solace in the corners of the room, provoked in him a conflicted mixture of protectiveness and introspection. For a man who had long relied on stoicism as his shield, the vulnerability displayed by Hinata was a poignant reminder of the complexity of human emotion, and it stirred within him questions he had long suppressed. In one quiet moment away from the crowd, Sasuke found himself leaning against a column near the periphery of the celebration, his eyes fixed on Hinata as she navigated the space between tradition and personal anguish. The distant hum of the festivities mingled with the soft rustle of silken garments, and the whispered concerns of those nearby. He noted how her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her embroidered sleeve, a gesture so fleeting yet charged with meaning. It was as if every small act, every slight deviation from her usual grace, was a silent confession of the inner battle she waged. Though he maintained his outward calm, the undercurrent of his own emotions rippled just beneath the surface, challenging the indifference he had so carefully constructed. The collective ambience of the day, while outwardly celebratory, began to echo with an unspoken tension that could not be entirely masked by the revelry. Conversations that once flowed with unreserved joy were now punctuated by moments of introspection. A close ally of Hinata's pulled her aside briefly under the pretext of sharing a private word, a soft murmur of concern that resonated with both empathy and caution. Even as the joyous laughter of the larger gathering continued unabated, there existed in the periphery a delicate awareness of a truth too heavy to fully ignore. This growing dissonance between public celebration and private sorrow created an atmosphere where every shared smile, every warm embrace, was subtly imbued with the knowledge that beneath the gilded veneer, something was amiss. The seeds of suspicion, though sown quietly and gently, began to take root among those who cared for Hinata. Their unspoken worry was a quiet counterpoint to the orchestrated mirth of the occasion, a reminder that the heart's turmoil often finds a way to seep into even the most meticulously arranged scenes of happiness. As the day advanced, the ripples of Hinata's internal guilt spread wider, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of the celebration. The once pristine canvas of the festivities now bore faint, yet unmistakable, traces of sorrow, a tender, transient vulnerability that no amount of traditional pomp could entirely erase. And in the midst of it all, Sasuke's silent observation continued to weave its own narrative, a tale of unexpected empathy, of a hardened soul momentarily softened by the delicate complexities of human emotion. In that interplay between public gaiety and private regret, the celebratory veneer proved as fragile as it was resplendent, hinting at the inevitable reckoning that lay just beyond the horizon of this carefully constructed day. As the festive day unfolded in its carefully orchestrated rhythm, the veneer of celebration began to show subtle fissures. In quiet alcoves and along winding corridors of the compound, observant eyes took note of discrepancies that belied the facade of flawless happiness. Amid the vibrant chatter and the graceful sweep of ritual, a network of hushed exchanges and furtive glances wove an undercurrent of intrigue, a tapestry of whispered suspicions that hinted at a secret too potent to remain hidden. In one summit corner of the reception area, Sakura, whose keen intuition had long guided her in matters of both battle and the heart, found herself drawn to the subtle shifts in Hinata's demeanor. As she gracefully moved among the guests, Sakura observed with a growing sense of unease the fleeting tremor in Hinata's smile and the way her eyes, usually warm and inviting, sometimes clouded over with an uncharacteristic sorrow. "There's something in her gaze tonight," Sakura murmured to herself, her mind already piecing together the fragments of what might be an unspoken turmoil. Later, while exchanging pleasantries with a few fellow confidants in a secluded garden alcove, her words turned cautious and low. "Have you noticed how Hinata seems distant, a touch distracted even when she's among us? It's as if some weight tugs at her every step." Not far away, Ino, ever perceptive and unafraid to voice concerns when the mood turned unexpectedly somber, caught sight of a moment when Hinata's laughter faltered. In the midst of a lively conversation with other guests, Hinata's hand, usually so steady as it brushed a stray lock of hair away, lingered a moment longer than necessary, as if in reluctant remembrance of something she wished to forget. Ino exchanged a quick, meaningful look with a nearby acquaintance, a silent question passing between them: could this gentle bride be concealing a deeper sorrow beneath her radiant composure? Even those who typically navigated the social gatherings with an untroubled air sensed the shift. Shikamaru, known for his normally relaxed indifference, found his thoughts unexpectedly preoccupied by the delicate signs of discord. As he watched Hinata from across a hall decorated with celebratory lanterns and garlands of blossoms, he noted the slight pause in her step, a momentary falter before she resumed her graceful march through the throng. In his quiet, measured tone later to a fellow observer, he remarked, "There's an unease in the air about her, a subtle discord that shouldn't be ignored." His words, though few, carried a weight that resonated with those who had noticed the same trembling vulnerability in her eyes. Throughout the day, the compound became a stage for these quiet observations. In shadowed hallways and behind closed doors, confidants and acquaintances exchanged their concerns in soft, tentative whispers. A trusted maid, while smoothing the folds of a guest's ceremonial robe, confided to a coworker, "The bride's smile falters now and then, as if haunted by something she cannot escape. It's as if the joy of this day is clouded by a secret too burdensome to bear." Such murmurs, though couched in the gentlest of tones, began to ripple outward, sowing seeds of doubt that threatened to disturb the carefully maintained celebration. As these subtle clues accrued, a palpable tension took root, a nervous expectancy among those who recognized that beneath the brilliance of the festivities, a truth lay dormant, waiting to be unearthed. Conversations once buoyant with laughter now carried an undercurrent of caution, as if each guest wondered whether the next moment might shatter the illusion of harmony. In secluded corners, over half-finished cups of tea, pairs of eyes met with knowing glances, silently acknowledging that something was amiss. One particularly discerning elder, whose years had taught him the cost of hidden truths, remarked quietly to his companion, "The winds of fate are restless today. Secrets, once sown, cannot long remain buried under the weight of our own hearts." Meanwhile, at the periphery of these murmurs, Sasuke maintained his silent vigil, perched on the edge of the gathering, a dark, solitary figure observing with an intensity that belied his customary reserve. He absorbed every nuance of Hinata's behavior with meticulous scrutiny. His dark eyes, usually so guarded and impassive, now flickered with an unexpected complexity as he watched her move through the crowd. Every subtle shift in her posture, every fleeting glance away from a smiling guest, fed into a quiet inner turmoil that Sasuke could neither fully understand nor openly acknowledge. His observation was not detached. Rather, it bore the weight of an internal conflict, one that resonated with the forbidden memories of the night past. In that charged silence, his thoughts churned. Was her distraction simply the natural anxiety of a bride, or was it the echo of something far more personal? A betrayal whispered in the shadows of her soul. The atmosphere of intrigue deepened as the day wore on, the initial exuberance of celebration now intermingling with an undercurrent of apprehension. The possibility of exposure, of the fragile secret that Hinata harbored being laid bare before the eyes of those who cared for her, loomed like an unseen specter. Each cautious word, every knowing glance, built an invisible pressure that threatened to break the illusion of the perfect day. The gathered guests, who had once reveled in the shared joy of the union, now found themselves balancing between the desire to honor the moment and the instinctive need to protect the vulnerable heart of the bride from the fallout of inevitable revelations. In a quiet corridor adorned with intricate paper lanterns, a small group of Hinata's closest allies gathered in subdued conversation. Their voices were low, imbued with both empathy and concern. "Have you seen the way she hesitates before speaking, as if every word is a struggle against an internal tide?" one whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the distant figure of the bride moving gracefully down the hall. Another added, "It's not merely the weight of the ceremony. There's something more, something that gnaws at her from within. I fear that this dissonance may not remain hidden much longer." Their words, though softly spoken, were laden with the anxiety of a secret that, if exposed, could unravel the delicate fabric of trust and tradition that held the day together. At the same time, the possibility of an imminent reckoning began to cast a long, foreboding shadow. As the minutes ticked by, the murmurs grew into a quiet chorus of concern, each note a reminder that even the most meticulously planned celebration could falter under the strain of concealed truths. The guests, bound by both loyalty and the natural human curiosity that accompanies the sight of vulnerability, looked toward Hinata with a mixture of admiration and wariness. They recognized in her an inner battle that was as profound as it was perilous, an unspoken conflict that threatened to disrupt the equilibrium of her carefully constructed world. Outside, the gentle rustle of the autumn leaves seemed to echo the soft susurrations of these hushed conversations. The wind carried with it the scent of impending change, a delicate reminder that secrets, however well hidden, have a way of resurfacing at the most inopportune moments. As the day advanced and the compound's festive decorations caught the waning light, an unspoken understanding permeated the air, a mutual recognition that the bliss of the celebration was, in truth, a fragile facade built upon a bedrock of silent sorrow and uncertain hope. And so, amid the smiles and the orchestrated merriment, the whispers of doubt persisted, threading their way through every conversation and every sidelong glance. They spoke of hidden truths and unfulfilled promises, of hearts burdened by choices made in the secrecy of the night. The tension was palpable, a simmering potential for exposure that threatened to cast everything into disarray. Each whispered concern, each subtle clue observed by a discerning eye, added to the collective sense of anticipation, as if all present were awaiting the moment when the delicate balance between honor and betrayal would finally tip. In this charged atmosphere, the day's celebrations continued with a bittersweet undercurrent. The joyous proclamations of union and future promise clashed with the silent, growing dread that something was amiss, a dread that bound every guest in a shared, unspoken understanding of the possible fallout. As confidants exchanged final, wary glances and the gentle murmur of caution spread like ripples in still water, the stage was set for a revelation that would challenge the very foundation of trust and tradition. The whispers of doubt, now a persistent hum in the background of the day's festivities, promised that the calm of the moment was fragile indeed, and that when the secrets of the heart finally emerged from the shadows, nothing would ever be the same. The festive day, once shimmering with orchestrated joy, had slowly surrendered its light to an encroaching gloom. In the quiet corridors away from the celebratory throng, the pressure of suppressed secrets finally became unbearable. Every whispered suspicion and every furtive glance had converged into a moment of reckoning, a turning point where denial was no longer an option, a moment of breaking. Naruto had felt it building for weeks. The subtle shifts in Hinata's demeanor, the half-heard murmurs that carried an edge of uncertainty, the lingering glances exchanged in secret. His heart, usually buoyed by unyielding trust and unwavering devotion, now pounded with an unfamiliar mixture of dread and determination. As he wandered through the silent expanse of an ornate corridor draped in the remnants of the celebration, his thoughts converged on one inescapable truth: something was terribly amiss. Drawn by the quiet intensity that had replaced the day's earlier gaiety, Naruto found himself outside a secluded alcove. There, away from the prying eyes of guests and the distractions of ritual, he saw Hinata standing alone, a solitary figure silhouetted against the soft glow of paper lanterns. In that vulnerable moment, every nuance of her posture and every tremor in her gaze spoke of inner turmoil that no celebration could mask. Unable to bear the mounting silence, Naruto stepped forward. His voice, rough with emotion and laced with the raw edges of betrayal, broke the stillness. "Hinata, please. What is going on?" The question was not merely a request for an explanation. It was a plea from a heart that had been shattered by the possibility of deception, the weight of confession. For a heartbeat, Hinata's eyes met his, a silent storm of regret, confusion, and desperate sorrow. The fragile mask of the dutiful bride crumbled for a fleeting second, revealing a soul tormented by choices that had torn her from the path of honor. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper, laden with the weight of an unbearable secret. "Naruto. I have something I must confess." The admission trembled on her lips, each word a knife that cut deeper into the fragile trust they had built over years of shared dreams. Before she could continue, a presence that had loomed in the periphery for too long could no longer be ignored. From the shadowed end of the corridor, Sasuke stepped forward. His normally inscrutable eyes, dark and steady, now flickered with an undeniable turbulence. In the space of a few heartbeats, the atmosphere shifted as if the very air recognized the significance of his approach. Naruto's gaze darted between the two, the sting of betrayal and the shock of revelation mingling in his eyes. "Sasuke," he began, his tone cracking with a mix of disbelief and raw pain, "what do you have to say?" Sasuke hesitated, burdened by the monumental gravity of his own role in the events that had transpired. His internal conflict, long suppressed beneath layers of stoic detachment, surged forth as he stepped into the harsh light of confrontation. "I never wished for this to happen," Sasuke admitted, his voice a measured blend of remorse and reluctant candor. "There was a night, a moment when choices were made in the darkness, that has left an indelible mark on all of us. I am as tormented by what transpired as you are by its consequences." His confession, though sparse, reverberated in the silence that followed, each syllable punctuating the profound betrayal that now lay bare. Naruto's heart in pieces. Naruto's heart thudded painfully in his chest. The ideal of a life filled with trust, shared laughter, and unwavering loyalty was now marred by the chilling reality of disloyalty. "Are you saying," he demanded, his voice raw with anguish, "that you, Hinata, have been unfaithful to me? And that you sought solace in the arms of someone else?" The words, heavy with the finality of shattered dreams, hung in the air like a death knell. His eyes, red-rimmed and glistening with unshed tears, bore into Hinata's downcast face as if searching for any hint of the truth. Hinata's silence was the answer. At last, unable to bear the weight of the charade any longer, her eyes welled with tears as she spoke, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. "I was lost, Naruto. I felt trapped between duty and despair. In a moment of weakness, I sought comfort where I should not have, and I regret it with every breath I take." The confession, raw and unadorned, was a knife that severed the bond of trust between them. Naruto staggered under the blow, his face a portrait of heartbreak and disbelief. His voice, once steady and filled with the promise of tomorrow, now cracked with the anguish of betrayal. "How could you? How could both of you, my Hinata, and you, Sasuke, let this happen?" The collision of conflicted souls. In that crushing moment of truth, the corridor transformed into a crucible of emotions. The distant echoes of earlier laughter, and the soft strains of celebratory music now seemed like cruel reminders of a happiness that was irreparably tarnished. Naruto's anger, sorrow, and profound sense of loss surged forth, demanding answers that felt as elusive as they were painful. Sasuke's gaze dropped to the floor, his features contorting with inner conflict. "I never intended for you to be hurt," he murmured, his tone imbued with a sorrow that was almost palpable. "Every day since that night, I have been burdened by the guilt of my actions. I have lived with the constant reminder that, in seeking solace for my own pain, I betrayed the trust you once placed in me." His admission, hesitant yet sincere, exposed the raw vulnerability behind the cool mask he usually wore, a vulnerability that spoke of regret, internal torment, and the inescapable consequences of choices made in darkness. Naruto's eyes flickered between Hinata and Sasuke, the man he had once trusted implicitly now standing as an unwilling accomplice to the heartache that threatened to consume him. His voice, now a broken whisper, carried the weight of a man grappling with the collapse of a cherished reality. I need to understand. I need to know why. How did our love, our bond, come to be so shattered? The question, simple in its phrasing yet monumental in its implication, seemed to reverberate against the very walls of the corridor, demanding an answer that none could offer without incurring further pain. Hinata's tears fell silently as she pleaded. I was overwhelmed, Naruto. I was drowning in loneliness, and the fear that I wasn't enough. I reached out for something to fill that void, and in doing so, I betrayed you. I never meant to cause you this pain. Her words, a mixture of regret and desperate apology, only deepened the fissures in the fragile edifice of trust that had once bound them. Naruto's gaze hardened for a moment as he tried to reconcile the shattered pieces of his heart. The confrontation, long anticipated and now brutally real, was an irrevocable fracture in the life he had known. His eyes shone with a bitter clarity as he looked from Hinata to Sasuke, his inner anguish transforming into a steely resolve tinged with heartbreak. I trusted you both. Everything we built, I believed in us. Now I'm left wondering if any of it was ever real. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, each word a stark reminder of the innocence lost and the promises broken. Aftermath and the lingering echo. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken grief, the reality of their betrayal mingling with the muted echoes of distant celebrations. Sasuke's internal conflict, once carefully concealed behind a mask of detachment, now bled into the conversation. His confession, reluctant and pained, exposed the intricate web of emotions that had driven him to that forbidden night. A night that had become an indelible scar upon them all. I am sorry, Naruto, Sasuke repeated, his voice cracking under the strain of suppressed remorse. Every day, I carry the burden of that night, and I understand if forgiveness is something you can never grant. His admission, laced with sorrow and the bitter taste of regret, left an indelible mark on the fragile silence that followed. Naruto, overwhelmed by a cascade of conflicting emotions, anger, sorrow, betrayal, and a desperate longing for answers, turned away, his eyes glistening with tears that mirrored the rupture of trust within him. The corridor, once a quiet witness to their private agony, now stood as a testament to a love unmirrored, a friendship irreversibly altered by the truth laid bare in that painful confrontation. Can anything ever be forgiven? Naruto's whispered question hung in the still air, a plea for solace in the face of irrevocable loss. Hinata's response was soft and broken, barely audible. I wish I could say yes, but I know I have shattered everything we once believed in. And Sasuke, his gaze lowered in remorse, added in a tone heavy with regret, I am truly sorry. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I can only hope that, with time, our wounds might begin to heal. In that charged moment, the inevitable confrontation had set in motion a cascade of consequences that would alter the course of their lives forever. The revelations, though painful and raw, had torn down the facades that once concealed hidden transgressions. Now, the three stood at the precipice of a new, uncertain reality, a reality where the path to redemption was shrouded in sorrow, and the journey toward healing would be long and fraught with the scars of betrayal. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, now blazed in the unforgiving light of confrontation. And though the future was obscured by the darkness of regret and loss, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The inevitable confrontation had become the turning point, a moment of painful clarity that demanded not only accountability and remorse but also the difficult, uncharted road toward forgiveness, if such a path could ever be found. In the heavy silence that followed the explosive confrontation, the fragile bonds between Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke lay in tatters, a shattered tapestry of trust, hope, and shared history. The once unyielding alliance that had defined their intertwined destinies was now splintered into fragments of raw emotion, each shard reflecting the pain of betrayal and the daunting challenge of forgiveness. The aftermath of raw truths. Naruto stood rigidly, his eyes clouded with a storm of fury and despair as he surveyed the two figures before him. His heart, once buoyed by unwavering trust in the promise of a united future, now felt like it was being crushed by the weight of every unspoken lie and every secret transgression. Every word that had been uttered in the heated exchange resonated like a betrayal that struck at the very core of his identity as a friend, partner, and protector. You shattered everything I believed in. Naruto's voice trembled, heavy with the anguish of unhealed wounds. The sound of his words, raw and jagged, seemed to reverberate in the narrow corridor, as if echoing the collapse of the bond they had once cherished. His gaze bore into Hinata, searching for remnants of the gentle soul he had loved, while also locking onto Sasuke, whose silence and admission now filled the space with an unbearable tension, the weight of guilt and regret. Hinata, her eyes swollen with tears and regret, could only stand in muted remorse. Every whispered apology from her lips was laden with the sorrow of choices that had betrayed not only Naruto's trust but also her own sense of self. In that moment, the delicate balance she had maintained between duty and desire was irrevocably disturbed. The remorse in her voice was palpable as she choked out, "I never wanted to hurt you. I lost myself in a moment of weakness, and now I fear I've destroyed the very foundation of what we shared." Her confession was not merely an admission of infidelity. It was a recognition that every secret she harbored had fractured the delicate trust that had once connected them all. The woman who had once been a beacon of quiet resilience was now laid bare, vulnerable under the harsh scrutiny of betrayal and the desperate yearning for absolution. Sasuke, standing a few paces away yet inexorably linked to the unfolding drama, wrestled silently with his own internal torment. His stoic demeanor, long a shield against the turbulent currents of emotion, had finally cracked to reveal an undercurrent of remorse and regret. "I have carried this burden alone, and each day has been a reminder of the wrong I committed," he murmured, his voice low and thick with sorrow. His eyes, normally as cold and distant as winter skies, now shimmered with an unexpected vulnerability. He knew that his actions had not only tainted his own honor but had also unleashed a cascade of pain that threatened to erode the bonds of loyalty and friendship. The collision of three broken hearts. The corridor became a crucible where the trio's most profound conflicts were laid bare. Naruto's anger was not solely directed at Hinata's lapse in judgment. It was also aimed at the shared betrayal, a betrayal that implicated Sasuke, whose own inner conflict added a further layer of complexity to the emotional maelstrom. Each word spoken in that fraught space carried the weight of history, every accusation a reminder of promises once made and now irrevocably broken. Naruto's voice, thick with disbelief and anguish, sliced through the tension. "How can I ever trust either of you again? Every promise we made, every dream we built together, are they all nothing but fragile illusions now?" His words, dripping with bitterness, punctuated the silence like shards of glass. In his heart, the once clear path to forgiveness was now obscured by a dense fog of betrayal and sorrow. Hinata's eyes met his briefly, and in that fleeting connection lay the desperate hope that somehow, time might mend what had been torn asunder. "I wish I could turn back the clock," she whispered, her voice quivering under the strain of guilt. "I wish I could erase that night, erase every moment that led us here. But I know that nothing can mend the cracks already formed in our hearts." Sasuke, his gaze shifting between the two, felt the sting of responsibility and regret like a physical blow. "I understand that my actions have rendered our past into something unrecognizable," he admitted. "I am not asking for forgiveness that can erase the pain, but for a chance to at least begin to understand how we move forward from here." His words, heavy with resignation, were a plea for redemption, a silent acknowledgement that the road ahead was fraught with the scars of what had transpired, the ripple effects on long-held bonds. Beyond the immediate circle of the trio, the repercussions of this emotional collision began to ripple outward. Long-held alliances and unspoken confidences within their shared community now trembled on the brink of collapse. Friends who had once stood as pillars of support found themselves grappling with the disintegration of trust. The shared memories, once a source of collective strength, now served as stark reminders of a fractured past. In the days that followed, familiar faces bore the weight of unspoken questions. Sakura's once optimistic smile had grown guarded, her eyes often flicking with concern whenever she encountered Naruto or Hinata. Shikamaru's typically relaxed demeanor had given way to pensive silences, his mind occupied with the implications of shattered trust. Each member of their circle was forced to confront the reality that the harmonious bonds they had nurtured were now marred by betrayal, a betrayal that threatened not only individual relationships but the very fabric of their shared community. The struggle for forgiveness. For Naruto, The path toward forgiveness was shrouded in an overwhelming sense of loss. Every step forward felt like a betrayal of the pain that had left an indelible mark on his soul. His struggle was one of both love and justice, a battle between the desire to hold on to the remnants of what they once shared and the instinct to protect himself from further hurt. His inner voice screamed for retribution even as his heart yearned for healing. The challenge was monumental. How does one forgive a betrayal so profound that it reverberates through every cherished memory? Hinata, too, was caught in the merciless grip of guilt. Her remorse was a constant companion, an ever-present reminder of the choices that had led her to this precipice. Each day became a trial, a relentless confrontation with the ghosts of her past, each echoing in the quiet moments of solitude. The challenge of forgiving herself was as daunting as the possibility of ever regaining Naruto's trust. In every tear shed, every whispered apology, Hinata faced the mirror of her own conscience, grappling with the question of whether she could ever redeem the love that had been so callously marred. Sasuke, burdened by the role he had played in the collapse of their shared ideals, battled with his own inner demons. His journey towards self-forgiveness was a solitary one, marked by moments of introspection and regret. The silence that once had been his refuge now echoed with the voices of those he had let down. To reconcile the man he was with the man he had become seemed an insurmountable task, a painful reckoning with the realization that redemption was not granted easily, if at all, a precarious glimmer of possibility. Yet, amid the devastation and the raw wounds of betrayal, there lingered a fragile, tentative possibility of reconciliation. The conversation in that dim corridor was not an end but a beginning, a painful yet necessary step toward a future where, perhaps, forgiveness might someday be within reach. As each character faced the full force of their emotions, the possibility emerged that healing could be forged through shared sorrow and a mutual understanding of the cost of their actions. In that uncertain moment, the three stood together, not as the united front they once were, but as individuals forever altered by the betrayals of the past. Their eyes, heavy with the burden of truth, held a silent acknowledgement of the long, arduous road ahead, a road where every step would be a testament to the difficulty of mending shattered allegiances. The overwhelming challenge of forgiveness was not lost on any of them. It was a mountain they must each climb alone, even as their paths were inextricably linked. The intense emotional collision among Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke had irrevocably redrawn the contours of their relationships. In the wake of truth, every word and every silence became a marker of loss, guilt, and the uncertain possibility of redemption. The bonds that once united them were now fractured by the forces of betrayal, leaving them to confront a future where the journey to forgiveness would be as arduous as it was necessary. A journey through the shattered remnants of their once unbreakable allegiances. In the soft, tentative light of early morning, the echoes of yesterday's shattered bonds still reverberated in the quiet corners of their shared world. The fallout of secrets, betrayals, and unspoken regrets had forced each of them into a crucible of self-reflection, a crucible that now promised to reshape their destinies in ways as profound as they were painful. Facing the aftermath, Naruto, with eyes that once gleamed with unyielding trust, now bore the weight of a heart fractured by betrayal. In the solitude of his private study, a modest room lined with memories of laughter, battles fought side by side, and dreams nurtured in unison, he allowed himself to revisit every painful detail of the confrontation. His thoughts wandered back to the corridor where raw truths had been laid bare, where words had cut deeper than any weapon he had ever faced. Amidst the ashes of trust, he grappled with a singular, piercing question: how could a love so deeply rooted in loyalty be so easily undermined by the choices of those he held dear? In these silent hours, Naruto resolved that the path forward would not be defined solely by the past, but by the possibility of forging something new from its ruins. Though the betrayal had irreversibly altered the tapestry of his life, it had also sparked in him an inner strength, a stubborn determination to redefine his own notion of love and duty. Whether reconciliation could ever be fully achieved was uncertain, yet he recognized that healing, even if it meant accepting irreversible change, was the only way to honor his own future. Hinata's journey toward redemption. Far from the solitude of Naruto's inner world, Hinata found herself adrift in a maze of remorse and fragile hope. In the quiet hours of dawn, she wandered through the temple gardens, a serene expanse where the muted rustle of bamboo and the gentle trickle of a nearby stream mirrored the tumult within her soul. Every step along the winding stone path was a confrontation with the consequences of her choices. The soft petals of the cherry blossoms, falling one by one, reminded her of moments lost to error and the irreversible nature of time. Yet, in that same natural solitude, Hinata began to glimpse the contours of a new beginning. Her heart, though scarred by regret, still harbored the capacity for kindness and compassion. With each trembling breath, she vowed to learn from the consequences of that fateful night, to seek atonement not by erasing the past but by embracing a future where her actions could, in time, rebuild trust. The journey ahead was daunting, a solitary path strewn with the remnants of shattered allegiances. But it was one she would walk with a humility born of deep sorrow and the hope for personal transformation. Sasuke's burden and the seeds of change. On the periphery of these personal reckonings, Sasuke lingered in a state of quiet introspection. The burden of his role in the cascading betrayal weighed heavily upon him, a constant reminder of the choices made in the secrecy of a forbidden night. In the stillness of a dimly lit dojo, where the echoes of his solitary training sessions resonated like distant memories, Sasuke confronted the duality of his nature, a hardened warrior bound by duty, now forced to reckon with the vulnerability of remorse. His internal struggle was a silent tempest, one that had long been hidden beneath the surface of his cool detachment. But now, as the consequences of his actions manifested in the pain etched on the faces of those he once called comrades, even he could no longer deny the need for change. Sasuke began to entertain the possibility that true strength lay not in the suppression of emotion, but in the capacity to acknowledge one's flaws and, perhaps, to seek redemption. His path forward was uncertain, whether it would lead to reconciliation with his past, a complete separation from the bonds he once cherished, or a new kind of alliance forged from mutual understanding was yet to be determined, charting new paths from the chaos. As the sun ascended higher, casting long, reflective shadows across the village and its hallowed grounds, the trio began to traverse diverging paths. Their collective future was no longer a single, unified tapestry but a complex mosaic of individual destinies, each piece marked by the scars of betrayal and the enduring desire for renewal. In hushed conversations with trusted allies, Naruto expressed a cautious willingness to forgive, tempered by the realization that forgiveness did not necessarily erase the past, but instead paved the way for a transformed future. His resolve was to rebuild brick by brick the trust that had once defined his relationships, even if the structure of that trust had to be reimagined entirely. Hinata, for her part, embarked on a journey of quiet atonement. She sought solace in the traditional practices of her heritage, dedicating herself to acts of service and introspection that might gradually mend the wounds of her conscience. The path was solitary and fraught with doubt, yet in every act of kindness, she rediscovered fragments of the gentle soul that had once been her strength, a strength that, she hoped, might one day be enough to bridge the gap between remorse and forgiveness. Sasuke, too, began to retreat into the shadows of his own mind, not as a means of further isolation, but as a crucible for self-reinvention. The warrior who had once shunned vulnerability now confronted it with a quiet determination, seeking a balance between duty and the emotional truths he had long denied. His future was not a return to the old ways, but an uncertain voyage into the realm of introspection and, perhaps, eventual reconciliation, a thought-provoking resolution. In the end, the inevitable consequences of that fateful night had irrevocably redefined what love, duty, and personal destiny could mean for each of them. The old definitions, rigid, unyielding, and unassailable, had been shattered, leaving behind a landscape where every relationship was now a complex interplay of pain, regret, hope, and transformation. The new paths forged in the chaos were not clear or simple. They were winding trails marked by the jagged edges of memory and the soft glow of possibility. As the day wore on and the village resumed its rhythm, a subtle, steady cadence that spoke of resilience, the trio's story lingered like a quiet refrain in the hearts of those who had witnessed their downfall, and perhaps, their slow ascent toward redemption. Their journey was far from over. In the shifting light of a new era, they would continue to redefine themselves, not by erasing the past, but by integrating its lessons into a future that promised growth, understanding, and the bittersweet potential for reconciliation. The final image left to those who listened closely was one of hope amid the ruins, a reminder that love, in its truest form, is not a fixed ideal but a living, breathing force, ever changing. ever demanding of sacrifice, yet capable of renewal. Duty was no longer a chain that bound them to the past. It had become a call to rise above it, to embrace the complexities of human existence with courage and humility. And personal destiny, once thought to be predetermined by fate and circumstance, now revealed itself as a mosaic crafted by each choice, each mistake, and each step taken toward healing. In this reflective denouement, the future was not defined by what had been lost, but by the promise of what could be rebuilt, a future where love and duty converged in new, unexpected forms, and where the human spirit, scarred yet unbroken, continued its relentless quest for redemption and truth.